And I had never met a priest who inspired me. I did not know my pastor's name. I had to go and talk to him, so I had to ask my parents my pastor's name, and I went and met with him, and I told him this story about how I love Jesus and I wanted to save the world. And then I met with my vocation director, who's now a bishop, and he somehow, thanks be to God, he let me into seminary. I should not have been led into seminary. I didn't believe in the true presence of the Eucharist, pray rosary, and I was pro-choice. But nonetheless, I made it into seminary, because it was the 1990s. And thanks be to God, I had a reversion in seminary, and I fell head over heels in love with Jesus and the Blessed Sacrament, started praying a rosary every single day, and my life really did change in a very profound way. And then I was sent to Rome. And I was very much so in love with the Blessed Sacrament, very much so in love with Mass, and it hit me really, really hard when I was in Rome. I just started seeing a lot of hypocrisy in what I was reading and studying about the lives of the saints, and what I was seeing in priests that I was encountering. And I read about the life of St. John Vianney, and at that point I was like, okay, so this is the priesthood. Hear confessions, say Mass, beautify your church, encourage people to go to adoration, and do lots of penance. Let's go. And then I looked at priests that I was meeting, and I was like, no one's doing this. I don't get what's happening. So over in Rome, I spent the summer in Assisi, and I made the decision while I was in Assisi with a lot of prayer that I was going to leave the diocesan priesthood and become a Franciscan. And I went back to the seminary and I met with my spiritual director, and I was like, I am out of here. And I just started getting really bitter and angry, and I just told him, I said, you're all a bunch of hypocrites, this is crazy. Here's the gospel, this is what Francis is living. And I met this group of Franciscans called the CFRs, and they live in the Bronx, and they sleep on the floor, and they're living like something real, I'm out of here. And my spiritual director, thanks be to God, a good holy Dominican, said absolutely not. He said, out of holy obedience, you're required to stay for the rest of the year. And so I stayed the rest of the year, but I just fostered this relationship with the friars in the Bronx. And I left that after that year, and I went and I spent a week with the friars in the Bronx. They said I could join their community. And the day that I was leaving, I met with one of the friars who was the vocation director, and he said, I've been praying, and you are welcome to join us, but I want you to go back to Rome. I want you to go on the retreat with your classmates, because they knew that I had a 5-day silent retreat. And he said, I think God wants to tell you something there. And so I went on retreat. And at that retreat, it wasn't I'm not a visionary, but I'm just telling you, during a holy hour, God presented me with St. John Vianney and St. Francis of Assisi. And he said, you can freely choose, but they are the same. And one lives in community, and one lives by himself, but they're both radical. One lives in a parish, and one serves in other ways. And I remember just being that holy hour, just being part of my frustration and the ache in my heart was the fact that I was in a parish my whole entire life, and I never saw a priest who wanted to set his parish on fire. And if I want to be a part of the cure, then I have to follow the curé. And so I made the decision that night in prayer, and I met with my spiritual director the following day, and I said, okay, I'm going to stay, but I want to follow St. John Vianney. And I'm here today because I believe that St. John Vianney is truly the model for all priests. Clearly diocesan priest, but he is the model for every single priest. And he is the pattern for every single one of us to rediscover the joy of our ordination and rediscover the joy of the dream that we had for ourselves. Matthew and I have had conversations about dreams, and I'm going to, if there is something that you do on this retreat, and I think that you should reestablish your habits and get your non-negotiables, and that you should come away by yourself to deserve a place and rest for a while. One of the most powerful things you can do on this retreat is return to the dream of your priesthood. And there's two dreams. There is the dream that God has for you, and there is the dream that you had for yourself. And both of those we are often very far from. And as diocesan priests in seminary, when we sat, some of us for 8 years, now it's like 9 years to become a priest. I was only in 7. But for 7 years, we sat in desks with a dream of what our priesthood would look like and how quickly that dream goes away. And the dream is always taken away because we settle for something less than the dream. And I want to just give you permission to say, maybe that dream is still true. Maybe that dream is still possible. And we surround ourselves by mediocrity, and we surround ourselves by a lot of excuses of why we can't live the dream. But there's a lot of power in allowing yourself to go back and say, no, I can be the priest that I dreamt of being. Now, to do that often means we need to change our habits and change our life. To do that, we often need to change relationships, whether it be brother priest, whether it be laity. But to genuinely spend time, like get out a piece of paper, get out Post-it notes, like what did I dream that my priesthood was going to be, and how am I living my life right now? And every single one of us knows priests that have fallen, and priests that have gotten entrenched in whatever the story might be. And sometimes it's an easy decision that they make, sometimes it's a crazy decision that they make. But none of them had that on their dream list. And little tiny decisions continue to add up. And every single one of those decisions that adds up, that takes them away from the dream, could inversely have been the opposite of them making tiny little decisions that would lead them to being the dream that they had. But then there's also the fact that God has a dream for you. God has a dream for your priesthood. And am I striving for that? Because let's be honest, like maybe my dream was wrong. Like, I'm not going to be the Pope, okay? but maybe my dream wasn't right. Maybe I dreamed too big or too little. I will tell you that there is never, I can go through my priesthood of I never dreamed that I would be coaching cross-country and track. I never dreamed that I would be somewhat engaged in the internet. I never dreamed that I would be the pastor of 4 parishes and 7 churches. I never dreamed that I would be the pastor with with my best friend, Father Hollowell. Like, never dreamt of those things. But the foundational things are true. Like, I dreamed that I would draw people to Eucharistic adoration, like, with all my might. I dreamed that, like, I would celebrate Mass, like, unbelievably reverently, and the celebration of Mass reverently would change the world. I dreamed that I would hear confessions all the time and always be willing to hear confessions. You know, I dreamed that I would be an effective preacher because my experience was that preaching in the Catholic Church was pretty toxic. So I think, what are the dreams that I have? And then take each dream and break each dream down into 2 or 3 tangible steps. Like, what is one step that I can take to get myself just closer to that dream? Not what is the entirety of the dream, but what is one tangible step that I can take to get closer to that dream? Because if we stop dreaming, then we will stop striving to be the saints that we're calling to be. So I do coach, and you cannot coach an athlete if an athlete does not have a dream to become a better athlete. So one thing that I do with every athlete, so before every single meet, cross-country meet, they're required to write down a goal. So if you write down your goal, you're 60% more likely to accomplish your goals. So I have all my athletes write down their goal, which means their goal time for that particular distance or event. They have to write it down. You're like 80% more likely to reach your goals if you write them down and you verbalize them. So I have my athletes write down their goals, and then they have to say them out loud in front of all their teammates. Because what that then does, it creates accountability, right? So what's to say that Father Jim has a dream, and Father Jim talks to Father Matthew, and Jim spends time on this retreat like, hey, you want to know what? Like, one dream that I had about my priesthood was about the way that I was going to be serving the poor, or the way that I was going to catechize young people. And I'm not reaching that dream. And I'm going to ask you to pray for me. Your likelihood in, number one, naming the dream, but number two, talking to another person, is going to convict you all the more to respond to God's grace, to begin praying about that, to begin fasting about that, to begin studying about that, so you can be who you want to be. Why do I bring this all up? Two things. When you go through the Wax Museum here in ours, one of the first displays is St. John Vianney at the age of 4. And what is St. John Vianney doing at the age of 4?
Praying to Mary.
His mom gave him a tiny little statue of the Blessed Virgin Mary. And what did John Vianney say in his youngest days? I want to win souls for the good Father. John Vianney had a dream. He had one dream in his